Hey, I'm back. I guess I'm going to have the video part 1 and part 2. My phone didn't cooperate when it got past like 25 minutes or so. So everything is where I left it off right here. Okay, everything matches up. We've got an identity. Okay, so Pascal's question, if we go back to where he started, okay, is he was saying, is it true that if the term in the middle gets larger, okay, that maybe this one over here would have to get smaller, okay? And that is true if you think about it, okay? If I take 1 away, okay, so that I have 3 minus 1 here, okay, this thing is not going to balance anymore, okay? The only way for that actually to balance, okay, would be to take away, I took away a half-size 1 from here, so I'd have to take a full-size 1 away from here to match it, okay, would be to do that, okay? Or alternatively, I could take away that one, okay, and again we'd balance. Or alternatively, I could take away this one, and we would still balance, okay? But one way or another, if I take away one thing that I'm subtracting, I have to take away one of the big ones that I'm adding. Okay, there's just no two ways around it. So that absolutely is true. So Pascal's question was actually, I think I've got this thing that, my professor in Switzerland told me and it doesn't seem quite correct. Okay, and he said, and I'm quoting, now they told us that if your exports are bigger than imports, the government has to increase the government expenses or reduce taxes. Okay? So he's saying if exports go up, okay, they have to do something to taxes or government spending. Okay? So let me get another block there to represent exports. And so now what we've got is 4 minus 4 plus 3 minus 2 plus 2 minus 2. And that must be equal to 0, but in fact it's actually equal to 1. Okay, so this is something we've got to fix. Okay? And so one way that we could actually fix that would be to take away one of those. Okay, so government spending would go down. Okay, we could also take away some investment. Okay, so investment would go down. That would balance everything. Okay, turns out that there's a couple other things that we could do as well. Okay, and I'm just noticing here that I'm short a block that I need. Okay, we could, instead of taking away one of the things we add, we could put in another one of the ones we subtract out. That would work as well, and that would get rid of the equals 1. Or we could put in another tax. That would balance things out. Okay, and pretend that this is another black one. We could put in another black one right there. Okay, that also would work. Okay. So the answer to Pascal's question, he's like, I don't see this making sense, okay? They were telling me that if I added exports, that I would have to add one of these, and that's not correct. So Pascal was right. It should be that if you add one of these, you have to take away one of those, okay? Or you have to take away one of these other 2x4 blocks, okay? So that's where Pascal was going with his question. Like I said, it's going to take a while to actually explain this. Okay? So at least in terms of his question, the second part of his question, or the actual meat of it, is actually incorrect. What he got in Switzerland, either they made a mistake on the board, or he made a mistake in his notes, or somebody made a mistake somewhere. Okay? But certainly Pascal at least recognized it, that's for sure. Okay, so I said also that this is related to kind of an interpretation of how the world works that really is not very correct. And so you kind of sort of know, I think, that the Trump administration is a little bit unusual, okay? Not relating to the world in the same way that previous administrations have, for good or for bad. Okay, we're going to find out the hard way which one it actually is. Okay, but the economics people that Trump is listening to are actually, well, kind of sort of not economists. Okay, so there's this guy named Peter Navarro, who's one of Trump's advisors. Peter Navarro is actually a macroeconomist from a pretty good school, UC Irvine, but not a very well-known macroeconomist, and a guy that's kind of been involved in I don't know what's the right sort of word, unusual political leanings over the last 20 years or so. So he's been involved with, he ran for mayor of San Diego, and he wrote some books knocking China and whatnot. So in any event, this is not like the people I'm citing in my class, or really probably not even like me, okay? That doesn't mean he doesn't know some stuff. It just means we need to be thinking he's definitely not mainstream macroeconomics, okay? And then the other guy is his Commerce Secretary, Wilbur Ross, who was just approved last week, okay? Wilbur Ross is another one of these billionaire buddies of Trump. And that in and of itself doesn't make him a good or a bad person, but he's certainly not a macroeconomist, and so his understanding of macroeconomics is kind of weak, okay? And so particularly Ross, okay, but I think to a certain extent Navarro as well, are taking this idea of injections and leakages much too seriously, okay? So I actually have chosen the blocks here to be approximately appropriately sized for the economy, okay? So when I had all of these things out here, like so, I was thinking of each block is approximately $900 billion. And so over here I have I minus S. Here in the middle I have G minus T. And over here on the right I have X minus M. The whole thing has got to be equal to 0. Okay? G minus T is commonly known as the government deficit. And X minus M is known as the trade deficit. And of course, the Trump people are really concerned about exports here, okay? And they're also concerned about imports. Too little of these, too much of these, okay? As a secondary thing, they're kind of concerned about the government deficit as well. Now, the old-style sort of Keynesian argument that you would learn in principles, we wouldn't do it like this with Lego, but I could, is that something like a tax cut is actually expansionary. And the way that that would work is a tax cut would be taking away some of these taxes, and you'll notice that this is no longer in balance. Our deficit has gotten bigger, so this thing has either got to get more negative or this one has got to get more negative. Okay? So this thing is more positive. One of these two has got to get smaller. Okay? So one way that that would be possible is if we cut taxes, investment might go down. Okay? Another thing that might happen is exports might go down, okay, like so. It would also be possible that savings would increase, okay. It would also be possible that gross imports would increase. And there's my block that ought to be black, but which is gray, okay. All of that is good, and the reason that this works is because the government actually can control how much tax revenue they have and how much they spend. So these two things are under the control of the government, and if they adjust these, the yellow and the white and the black here do have to change. But that does not imply that the government controls these things over here. and that if we change these things, that the other ones are going to adjust. That doesn't work that way at all. Okay? So Trump and his people like Wilbur Ross say, well, and Ross is quoted on this as saying, well, it's obvious to anybody who's taken principles of macro that if you increase exports, GDP goes up. Well, it's not so obvious at all when you think about it as injections and leakages, because now this thing cancels out, these are a zero, and we've got too much stuff over here. Either government spending has got to go down, and that's possible, but I don't see Congress doing that anytime soon, okay? Or investment has got to go down, okay? That would work, but can you imagine the Trump people saying, we're going to increase exports to decrease investment? Okay? That's part of what they're saying in this model that they're thinking, but I don't think they'd admit to this second part over here. I think people would say, hey, wait a minute, that's a bad thing, okay? So what they're doing is telling us only about this one, and they're pretending that this one isn't going to happen. Well, maybe it doesn't happen. Maybe its government spending actually goes down, but of course, like I said, Congress doesn't really like that one very much, okay? Oh, maybe it's going to be that savings is going to go up. That sounds really good. But I think it's kind of wishful thinking to think that this could happen and this could happen and this could happen, but only the one we really like is going to be the one that actually happens. Okay? Another thing that would be possible is taxes could go up. Okay? But of course, the Trump people said, no, they're not going to raise taxes, and the Republicans in Congress don't want to do that. Okay? So what Ross is saying is, oh gosh, it's obvious that if I increase exports, that GDP is going to go up. But what he's not thinking is net exports are actually connected to all this other stuff here. And we don't get the exports without getting the other things. Okay? And so it's that lack of connection that's really posing a lot of problems for macroeconomists like me trying to take the Trump people seriously at their word, because it's not clear to me that they really understand what they're talking about. And I want to emphasize, if we'd had a Democrat elected, I'd be saying different stuff, but the same sort of opinion that, they kind of are not getting this either. Okay? Now, of course, one thing I haven't talked about here is one way that we could increase exports and keep everything in balance. Remember, it's out of balance right now if you count it up, is we could increase imports. Okay? We export more stuff, we pull in more stuff. Okay? Of course, the Trump people really are not going to like that one either, but that would kind of solve the inconsistency in the logic of what they're proposing. Okay? All right, so to sum up, I really don't have a lot of summary here. There's a whole lot of different things that we've been doing here, okay? So what do we got here in conclusion, okay? Okay. One is you've learned about injections and leakages. That's not bad stuff, okay? Can be a useful way of thinking about the world. But I guess it's one of those things that we used to put kind of at the top of the list of things that students ought to learn, and now we push it further down towards the bottom of the list. So you learned an optional topic instead of a required one. 2, we answered Pascal's question. Okay. And 3, okay, we brought into question this whole idea of Trump, Ross, and Navarro. Okay. We brought into focus this whole problem with their approach that so Trump, Ross, and Navarro may be, I guess what's the right word here? Underthinking. Underthinking their position. Okay, again, I'm picking on Wilbur Ross because he's the one that said what he believes most clearly, and it kind of seems to me like he's had a month of macro, but not a semester of macro, might be a good way of describing it. Okay? And then 4, we've done this stuff about equalities versus identities. And the real shortfall in what Ross is doing is not recognizing that the way we count up GDP and the way we break it down is an identity. It can't be different than the way that we actually count it up. If it does come out differently, it's like squeezing a water balloon. If we squeeze it at one side, it bulges out on the other. He's forgetting about the bulge. Okay? So because everything is linked together as an identity, it's not clear that we're going to get the outcomes that those guys actually think that we're going to. Okay? Hey, it's been a long video. Thanks for being here. Bye.